Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining this session today. Automation Diaries, the Wizards of Automation. I'm very fortunate to have a very good friend of mine, Gavin Simpson, join us today for a very hearty conversation on automation and its growth in the industry. Gavin runs the Strategic Alliance ecosystem for EMEA at Blue Prism and has huge amount of experience with the clients in Asia Pacific and in India and the European region. And there will be a lot of key takeaways from him today with regards to a number of topics that will benefit all of us. Welcome, Gavin.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for having me today. It's great to see you again.
Thank you. Let me start by congratulating you on a super success of the Blue Prism World 2020. It was phenomenal. I've attended some of those sessions myself, and I felt the lineup was brilliant. The topics were very relevant, and there was a lot of learning and a peek into the future of what's coming our way in the automation industry.
Thank you. It was an interesting experience. We ran it virtually for the first time, I think, as every tech company is doing, and it went really seamlessly. So I think that's a sign of things to come. I'm not sure we're going to go back to doing these massive events where people fly around the world. So thank you. It was really interesting experience.
Right. You've been meeting a lot of clients along with the partners. Tell us what's trending. What are the clients asking for when it comes to automation and emerging technologies? What are some of the solutions that you believe will be getting all the right focus post-COVID?
So Uday, I think the first thing to say is that we're living, as the quote goes, in interesting times, super challenging times. And my heart goes out particularly to the population of India, some of the stuff you guys are going through. But on a global level, this pandemic has challenged the way that we think about stuff. Now, amidst that tragedy, there are opportunities. So if you look at what is happening in our industry, we now see customers embracing the need to get going on their digital programs, not because it's a nice to have, because it's a necessity. If you think about the decimation to the workforce that's happening across all the sectors, but particularly those sectors that were reliant on contact centers or agents, their business continuity plans have been totally ripped up. No one, despite the level of diligence that they're planning, no one would have expected this level of chaos and disruption. So I think really there are three things that customers are insisting on. The first continues to be a relentless focus on efficiency. So, taking cost out and, embedding, we'll talk about centers of excellence later, but embedding a mechanism for automating and streamlining processes and taking cost out. That's a given. The second, though, I think they're demanding, an impact on customer service. And, we at Blue Prism have seen this really playing out with some of the big programs we're doing in the contact center. If you think of banks, insurers, telcos, any kind of organization that has a massive reliance on inbound calls coming into a contact center, chatbots, there is a huge opportunity now to shape customer experience using automation in conjunction with other technologies. And we're seeing some clients, the number of awards at Blue Prism World went to an organization that's taken nearly 40% of their OPEX out in 6 months in their contact center. And then the third thing, which is kind of linked to that, is innovation. So clients want these solutions, not just to, be sat in the back office, but they want them to have high impact, and they're insisting on innovation. And that innovation is taking a couple of forms. One is, if we talk about hyper automation and connecting these different technologies together, that's the first thing. So not just a bot sat there on its own, but a bot with a chat bot with an AI connection linking into Salesforce or Dynamics. And the second thing is innovation in terms of creating value. So that could be around the consumption model. So cloud, we're seeing cloud as a massive driver. And as you know, Uday, before coming to Blue Prism, I spent 6-7 years in the cloud industry at Box and DocuSign. And finally, I think, Blue Prism, certainly with our acquisition of Thoughtonomy last year, creating this SaaS offering, others as well, we understand that we need to embrace cloud to really improve the agility and the flexibility we deliver to companies, and let companies choose on how they want to consume automation and digital technologies.
A lot of spotlight on the digital exchange at Blue Prism. Clients are really wanting to know a lot more of it. Can you elaborate?
So it's great that you mentioned that. That was one of the highlights, I think, of Blue Prism World. And anyone that hasn't, accessed Blue Prism World, the platform remains open for another 45 days. Just go online and register. All the content is there for you guys to see. And on the digital exchange, or the DX as we call it, this is basically a portal where third parties, so that could be developers, it could be organizations, could be partners, could be individuals, can build automations using their technology and post them, a bit like the app exchange on, in the Salesforce ecosystem or the App Store. And the great thing is those automations, or those skills really, can be downloaded into Blue Prism Digital Workers using drag and drop. So the analogy I think I've shared with you in the past is, for those of a certain age that remember the Matrix films, when Keanu Reeves learns Kung Fu by being plugged in, he suddenly knows Kung Fu. That's what happens to our Blue Prism Digital Workers when they get imbibed with one of these skills. And this thing, DX, we announced it a year and a half ago, but the success has been phenomenal. And we actually announced at Blue Prism World, we now have 1,500 downloadable assets from companies the big, so IBM and Microsoft, right down to literal startups with 2 or 3 people. And we've got, I think, 27,000 people have accessed the DX and are downloading assets. And the interesting thing is, we started it as a collaborative way of just broadening the message and encouraging innovation. But it's also now, because we're announcing we can do private DXs, it's a great way for organizations to disseminate or to collate their own skills that they want to roll out, and either keep that internally, or in the future they'll be able to monetize those assets as well and sell them on to other people. And it's really driven a huge pickup in terms of how Blue Prism is perceived. So I think, we were the pioneers, has really livened it up, and we're getting great feedback on that.
Great. Gavin, you've got a phenomenal ecosystem of partners. There are a lot of partners who are watching this particular session. What would be your guidance to them in terms of those 3 or 4 things that they should be extremely careful about when embarking on such enterprise-wide automation projects?
So you're right to call out the partners. The reason I joined Blue Prism, I was happily engaged in my previous company. The reason I joined was this remains the best example of a partner ecosystem that I've ever seen. Blue Prism, like others in the space as well, but we went all in with our partners. So whether that's the channel, whether it's tech partners in our Technology Alliance program, or the piece that I'm most focused on, the global system integrator and advisory firms. And, we basically built our business on that. And they were, all of the major players sponsored Blue Prism World. We were, hugely appreciative of that. I think to your question, what the advice is, the advice remains that these programs, if they're going to be successful, they're not sprints, but they're a collection of sprints. So there are very few organizations that are succeeding with a big bang approach, like trying to go immediately out of the gate with an enterprise-wide program. The smart players is approaching this like in an agile development, so a series of scrums with quick wins, right? So that's where I think the SIs that have built out their practices, they've taken our robotic operating model, which has been the cornerstone of Blue Prism's success in our 20 years almost, and they've turned it into a way of delivering quick wins to the organization. The second thing is, the fundamental requirement, and something we bang on about all the time, is that these programs have to be business-led. So there needs to be a play in operations, or one of the key areas of the business. IT has an important role to play, but it's in governing the program. Now, if you look at how that plays out in reality, clearly COEs, centers of excellence, are the norm now. And it used to be that those COEs were created but run by partners. So you might have, your company, you might have any other company come in and run that. I think that's happening less, or if it is happening, it's being run by some of the Indian pure plays are doing a lot of this, or boutique players. But increasingly, companies want to do that themselves. So an SI will set the COE up, give guidance, maybe even bring some people in, but they'll hand that off to the company to run. And we're seeing this in some of the huge banks that are using Blue Prism and other technologies. And then the role of that partner shifts. The role comes to then taking the program further. So that might be around innovating. And what technology can we add? How do we bring chatbots or AI in a measured fashion to solve specific problems? And we've got great stories in banking where we're using our technology in conjunction with things like Salesforce or other digital apps to solve for loan performance management. Think about COVID, all this pressure on getting funding out to businesses who are really struggling. You know, it's the combination of tech that's doing that, or claims management and insurance. So really partners are seeing huge value now by embedding our technology as part of bigger, innovative digital programs, is what I'd say, Uday.
Great. Small organizations that would have embarked on automation and developed 5 to 10 assets, and they're certainly walking their way up to scale further. And there are large enterprises that have about 40 to 50 bots or automation assets. The importance of setting up a center of excellence is something that I really want to hear from you, and a command center to manage these bots post development and testing and hypercare in production.
So that's a great question. COEs. If we look at some of the first programs that we ran, so one of the global banks that well, I can call it out, HSBC, it's in the public domain, have had tremendous success with our digital workforce. And their COE, I think, is a great example of how other organizations are proceeding, and that is now being run in-house by the bank. The role of that COE, like any others, is firstly around setting the rules of the game. So, you know, it's no good having all this innovation and people come up with ideas of, you know, we could automate this and that. It has to be structured. So the structure of how that pipeline of automations gets managed, gets prioritized, and then links back into, on that prioritization, the business focus. So there is, I think, a misconception that COE is kind of IT taking over. So back to that mantra of, you know, being business led and IT governed, that is not the case. So the successful COEs are ones where there is a clear link into the business. So whether that's the operations team or whether that's input from, you know, sales and marketing and the functions of the organization. And then that obviously the IT team have a role to play in that as well. There's also a key piece here, which is about delivering scale. So if you think about, you know, what Gartner says about hyper automation and how this plays out, there are two key elements there. One is delivering scale. The other is delivering connected innovation. I think the COE is the bedrock of that. And companies that try to accelerate their path to automation and digitization without setting up a COE are going to struggle. So, you know, I wonder whether there's a role for partners in, you know, delivering COE as a service. It was something we were talking about in the aftermath of Blue Prism world. Imagine that, like a COE for a range of different banks all collaborating together, run as an innovative service over the cloud. Maybe that's something for the future. You know, one of the fundamental areas that's really driven our success is the work that our partners have done. And I can't help, Uday, but call out, you know, the work that you did and your former employee, you know, setting that whole program up, that really was the engine room for delivering what has become one of our most successful customer stories. So, you know, forget the partnership for a bit, but turning that into, you know, one of the biggest customers on the planet using Blue Prism, and the way you teed up that control room, I think is best in class. And, you know, you quite rightly, that continues to win awards even following your departure. So I think you should ask yourself that question, and we'd be more than happy to support you on that journey.
Thank you very much. I can see your cats out there. Would you like to introduce us to your cats?
This is my little assistant here. They find a way in, yeah. Very curious, yeah. I wait for him to kind of go across the camera. So they're my little digital. They're not robot cats. They're real cats as well.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's good. That's nice. So, Gavin, talking about the governance, it's the involvement of the leadership across different levels. Your
Yeah.
views on that would be very helpful.
Yeah, so if you think about, you know, what does governance mean? I think, you know, at the first level, it's it's regular control points, but what are you controlling? What are you measuring? So, you know, obviously, cost takeout has been one of the key metrics, and I think that remains, you know, key for any program. But that shouldn't be just measured in terms of FTEs that are redeployed or in some cases taken out of the business. That costs can be saved by redeploying certain tasks, so enabling growth without people needing to be hired, for example. But governance also means managing the expectations that are being fed back to the leadership. So it's great if you've got a business sponsor like the COO saying, yeah, we're going to do automation, but unless that person or their staff is involved in the governance process, you can lose momentum. So it's not just about kicking this thing off with senior exec support. They have to be involved in a regular cadence. And so our Chief Customer Officer, John Turkoff, who you'll know from his time at Bank of New York Mellon, was one of our first ever customers. He's a massive believer now in this governance model being set up with the inclusion of IT for sure, but also with those business executives. And that's kind of how we give advice to our partners in adapting our robotic operating model to set up the governance function.
Yeah, and change management, right? That's again a very equally important aspect of any success in an automation project.
So change is an emotive subject. I would challenge anyone that says they love change. Change always brings some fear or trepidation with it. So it's in how you firstly communicate what the change is designed to be achieving. So having the goal in mind. And sometimes you may set out with a goal of something you want to change, some disruption you want to bring, but ancillary benefits kick in. So, I mean, there's one particular program I would call out. So we've been working the last year with one of the world's leading telecoms players, a global telco that has been using automation in traditional back office functions, and this is all coming out in the press. There'll be a series of articles about this. You'll see who we're talking about. But they basically, we hit on an opportunity to move from the back office into something actually much more visible to the senior execs, and that was their front office contact center transformation. And if you think about, I mean, this company has in their main country alone, they have 8,000 agents in their contact center. You can imagine the cost of that, but also the key driver and the thing that they wanted to change was how can they use customer service as a differentiator versus their rivals. And the way the agents handle inbound calls, chatbots, IVR approaches was seen as a huge thing where automation and digitization could be used to invoke change. But it's not an easy thing to address. And we work with actually two main partners were involved in delivering this program. So one focused on the B2B side, the other on the B2C. I think there were over 19 different applications involved in those contact centers. So that's why the project was, I think, one of the more complex we've done. And Blue Prism being at the center of that, given our enterprise scalability, our security, they were the kind of table stakes. The company wouldn't have gone ahead with something that wasn't secure, wasn't enterprise scalable. But we had to do a ton of thinking about how we manage this change. So firstly, how do we convince the leaders of the contact center that this was going to be a good thing, and that it wasn't just yet more technology that they're going to have to sell to their agents that's going to disturb their daily working lives and give them more stress. And that is a communications program, and I really think the partners involved did a fantastic job of delivering that messaging. I think the second thing is executive support. So we were fortunate enough to have the president of the telco literally embrace the program. So in his address to the investor community, he literally called out this program and referenced the fact that they were targeting €1 billion of savings in this thing. Now wind forward a year, and one of those key metrics of how change was achieved was that agents, the churn. So contact centers often measure their success by how long agents stay, and replacing people in the contact center, the churn is a major cost and major inconvenience, and they managed to reduce their churn by 30%, which is incredible. We managed to take 7 minutes out of the duration of an average call. So reducing the average call into the contact center from 9 minutes to 2 minutes. Just think about that. If you're calling your bank or your insurance company or telco, we give you, 7 minutes back on every call. And then the high level impact was a 50 million euro saving in the first year of operation. Now, if you think back to, the question we talked about earlier around governance, that's a fantastic, metric to report back and say, well, this change that we were trying to bring, this disruption, this value that we were trying to create has delivered these tangible metrics. Now, what that means is these guys are really desperate to get the next wave of automations going and bring the next bit of technology in. And that is becoming, it's becoming almost viral, to use an unwelcome pun, I suppose, in these days. But other telcos are now wanting to understand what we've done. We're seeing, this company embrace that message and actually talk to banks and insurers about the change that they've been able to achieve. But I would really emphasize that while the technology is key, delivering on that change management vision is a cultural thing. And that's why you need a mix. It takes a village, right? You need an SI, you need an advisory firm, you need technologists, but you also need people that can message this and manage the human side of this evolution.
Great. Gavin, what I'm now going to do is a bit of a twist. As you very well know, that any successful implementation means that you need to ensure that you tick off all the different checks and balances and maintain the compliance at every single phase and the different stages in every phase. So I'm going to throw at you a few of the phases and the stages. You're the advisor to the client, and they're seeking your advice in as simple terms as you can. Those 2 or 3 areas that you should be very crisply looking out for to ensure success. So I'm just going to start. The first one would be the due diligence and the process discovery.
So, the first thing to note is there is a plethora, there's a whole range of technology out there. So what people tend to do is they fire up the latest Forrester or Gartner report. And I think, we've just seen Gartner's top 50 list for automation. So there are over 50 RPA providers. So firstly, kind of due diligence around the technology and also the discovery of processes. That's a complex task in itself. And my advice would be that should not be rushed, right? So that is an important phase which involves communication amongst the company. What problems are we trying to solve? What's the roadmap? So we may want to start in the back office around finance or procurement, P2P, traditional things, but where is this going? So do we envisage, or why wouldn't we envisage, that you guys will want to also bridge into the front office and talk about things like, how we're impacting customer service, how we are assisting with the move to cloud for our ERP. If you're using SAP, are you planning to move to S4HANA? How does that influence our choice of tools and provider and service provider as well? So the advice would be use that as a mini project in itself to decide what you're trying to do, and therefore which tools you're going to need and how you're going to approach the pipeline of automations you want to build.
What should you watch out for in a business case?
So business case, multiple elements. I would say it has to be clear and measurable, and the time frame as well, right? So I think the early phases of some of these big RPA programs going back 4 or 5 years, it didn't do us any favors because there was this kind of panacea. It's going to come in and it's going to deliver 80% cost savings. And some of the companies actually achieved phenomenal results, but many of them didn't. And, there was this disappointment that, instead of 80% that the vendors, we talked about, only 40% were achieved. But think about it, 40% cost savings. Most companies would give their arm for that. So I think being clear on the phases, the milestones, and pragmatic assessments of what's going to be delivered on the cost side is the first thing. And also think more broadly about that. So business case, what does it mean for our customers? So the service that we deliver to our customers, that's increasingly a differentiator, particularly given COVID, right? Whole sectors are being decimated. We were just reading this morning in the Sunday Times, like the retail sector, Tesco's is the UK's biggest retailer, is one of the top 5 in the world. is now insisting that their suppliers across the board take a 50% discount. So they are basically saying, if you want to supply to us, it's going to cost you, twice as much. Imagine the opportunity there for, for automation and digitization. But imagine the challenge in trying to deliver on that, and the stress on delivering a customer, the right service to your customers. And then I think the third angle, which some companies are looking into now, but I think is going to become much more important, is what's the return, what's the business case for your own people, right? So what are you doing for your staff? Think about how staff, employees, the transition, the stress that they're going through in COVID, many people being furloughed or made redundant. These programs can deliver huge benefits back to the staff in terms of improving the quality of work, reducing the amount of rote or boring work that they do, but that needs to be positioned. So I can see chief people officers, HR directors actually getting involved in the governance of these programs. If you think about what we and other companies have been doing during COVID, providing free licenses, but also giving advice on how you use this program for good. So I'm sure all the vendors have it, but we've got this thing called Blue Prism for Good, and it's about giving back. And I can see the people angle becoming almost as important as some of the other aspects in forming a business case.
Getting the IT team involved upfront at the very beginning of your project to ensure successful implementation, compliance and hygiene, and that all the IT standards are being maintained and managed.
Yeah, so this is the business IT, bifector, let's call it. So there is always a degree of tension here. What I would say is both need to be involved. If one side, so if business isn't involved and IT isn't involved, the project's going to fail. So the timing is clear. There needs to be a clear role for both, I wouldn't say both sides, both factions, as it were. IT, however, need to focus on what they're good at, which is how is this going to impact our infrastructure? How is it going to advance or detract from our strategy around cloud? So it's no good us bringing a technology in that only runs on AWS if we're pursuing a route with Azure, for example. How does it affect our strategy around remote working and all those considerations? What the trick is, and this is never easy, is convincing IT to focus on that stuff and not worry about the more business focused aspects. So how does this impact on our VSG, our vision, strategy and goals? That should be for the leadership to talk about. How does it impact on what our customers want? IT folks may have an opinion on that, but they're not the people that own that journey. How does it affect employee experience, like we were talking about earlier? That's why both need to be involved, but someone needs to adjudicate at that. And that's where we've seen our partners, our advisory partners, play a key role. And they're also, I'm sure they won't mind me saying this, they're also a convenient person to point at during the trouble that inevitably comes in a program, right? There's always ups and downs in a program, and having that third party there that can basically take the heat, get blamed, and then bring a solution and bring the parties back together is really important in these programs.
Engaging accredited developers for development and ensuring that they follow the standards.
Yes, absolutely. So Blue Prism has, and I'm sure other vendors have done the same, we have put a lot of investment in our accreditation program. And it's actually made us, I think, pretty challenging to work with, because it isn't just a tick box exercise. So if you want to get Blue Prism certified, you literally have to go through a series of online courses. You then have to sit an exam, as you guys, you well know, you've been through it. And we're really proud of that. We're really proud that when we accredit our partner organizations, and we have 3 levels of certification right up to platinum, that is really difficult. It means, going through getting 50, at the highest level, getting 50 customers to fill out a survey saying that they are over 80% satisfied with the work that you've done. So it is fundamentally important. The temptation might be to cut corners or to say, do you know what? We've chosen Blue Prism, and we've got a bunch of guys that have done automation anywhere or soft automotive. Let's just use those; they'll figure it out. It's not a great idea. I would say that the technology, whether it's ours or others, is becoming more intuitive. So there are commonalities. We're all kind of converging on a way of getting stuff done. I think our robotic operating model, there are versions of that. It's a common standard. And I think as you see the shift to cloud, so it's going to become ever more easy for people to, use skills on one product in others, but I don't cut the corners on that. If you're thinking about hiring a developer that isn't certified because he or she is 15% cheaper, that's a false economy.
What about following the agile methodology for the development rather than go the waterfall way?
What I would say is the partners that have been most successful with Blue Prism are ones that have taken our robotic operating model, which, I mean, let's be clear, right? One of the key drivers of our success over the last, 8 years of RPA has been the ROM. But that meant that the ROM was built, on a model which was very much waterfall, right? It's a sequential model, and it is evolving. But the smart partners, including your former employer, basically took that and developed an agile version. So they created, turned it into a series of sprints. They advised their clients and helped them set up Scrum Masters. We actually have on our team, we have a superb resource who I think you've met, Bindi, who runs our professional services team in APJ. And she's one of her former roles was as a Scrum Master, and she has basically helped clients introduce this notion of quick wins. And, she runs her team that way as well. So I think that's very much the future as we also move into, cloud becoming a much more important vehicle for delivering, automations, dialing up, dialing down for people consuming and seeing the value faster. Yeah, agile is the future, my friend.
Following the testing procedures, ensuring that the bot goes through not just the happy path testing, but all the different exceptions, variations, the different types of testing mechanisms like, load testing, regression testing, smoke testing.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm just thinking ruefully about one of my previous roles. I worked at Mercury Interactive about 15 years ago. So we were involved in the whole business process testing piece. Again, it's, I wouldn't want to talk too much about the technology, but fundamentally, if you think about the scale of some of these programs, in COVID, so we're seeing one of the sectors exploding with interest is health. We talked about a number of these use cases at Blue Prism World recently. The NHS, so the UK National Health System, is seeing huge value from our technology and others in terms of delivering time back to the caring staff. So there's a practitioner you may have seen on LinkedIn called Darren Atkins, has done some fantastic work helping some of the health trusts to put robots in to deal with the no-shows. So when you book an appointment to turn up to see your doctor and you're not going to turn up, people tend to call in. If that's missed, it means a care staff person is wasting 15, 20, 30 minutes, and that all adds up. So, but the scale of these programs means that if you haven't done the requisite, load testing, if you haven't, resolutely checked the impact on infrastructure, or, at the user end, if you've not done the UAT, and, people, it just doesn't fit with the process, the whole thing's going to go south. And that remains one of the key value points that a partner can bring. And, it isn't necessarily something that the COE is best placed to do. The COE should be there managing the pipeline of automations, dealing with the internal governance, linking back to stakeholders. And they should then, in my opinion, they should call in those experts to deliver on the testing piece. Because if things go wrong, that's a big problem to fix, as I'm sure you will have had experience of.
My last phase would be the whole hypercare, especially the first month once it gets into production or a controlled environment, how important that is and what should be the key points to watch out for.
Yeah, so I'm just thinking about some of the things that we've learned at Blue Prism. So, when I joined, I suppose nearly 3 years ago now, we had a very simple model. It was like we had the best robots. We sold uniquely only through partners, and we let partners basically crack on. We insisted on the ROM, but we didn't really have any kind of hypercare. We just allowed the partners to do that, and they did a great job, but they did very different jobs. So what we've now done is we've learned from some of the cloud technology. So if you think of Salesforce or ServiceNow, or where I work, Box, DocuSign, we really embrace the customer success model. So that is basically a team of people who are there to guarantee or drive the success of the implementation, to ensure that customers, users, see the value that was envisaged by the program. So that could be as simple as just checking in with the COE on a regular basis to see, well, that pipeline of automations, how are we doing? What does utilization look like? Which of the robots are multitasking? Is there any advice we can give you there? And this is a service that we don't charge for. It comes as part of the robot license, and it's had a massive effect. And we've also we've basically got in our teams, we've got a number of ex-customers, and that makes such a difference, because these people have been on the other side of the fence. So they've rolled out their own Blue Prism programs. And you're quite right, that first month, or the first quarter is fundamentally important. And what you're going to hear from sponsors is, well, that thing that you told me was going to deliver, was going to change my world. How many automations have you delivered? What level of utilization do you have? And that's where these quick wins, having something in the pocket that you can wheel out in that first governance board review to say, look what we did here. It's fantastic. And that's where things like, teams naming the robot, naming the digital worker, Uday, right? So look what Uday's been able to do in procure to pay. Or, Frida's come in and she's given, 30% of time back to our agents in the contact center, doing marketing around that. All that stuff helps, but it has to be part of an ongoing process. Otherwise, if you've got digital workers that are 25% utilized, and we as the vendors only turn up, when it's time for renewal, doesn't work. It's not going to succeed, and it gives our industry a bad name.
Which sectors do you see are the fastest in embracing automation?
Yeah, so we had a whole section on this at Blue Prism World. So you've clearly got, and it may differ Asia Pac versus Americas, but globally, I'd say the pioneers, banking, insurance, remain front and center. So they continue to accelerate, and they remain our biggest sector by far. So we've got a number of banks that are using our service now in conjunction with other technologies to streamline account opening. And also not just the account opening itself, but also the checks that go along with that. So the KYC, know your customer, anti-money laundering checks. That was tying up, I think one of the big banks that we've worked with for many years had 5,000 people in India just doing KYC, and that was costing them, I think it was $1 billion a year or something ridiculous. So we're not going to get rid of the requirement for all those people to do that. But what we are able to do is say, well, let's take those resources and have them intervene in a human in the loop fashion only where they're needed, and that we automate 60, 70, 80% of that work. So account opening is interesting, because if you think about, there's a lot of back office, traditional RPA, ground that's covered, but it starts at the front office. So it's me calling up saying, hey, I'd like to open an account for my daughter. And I might do that on my mobile phone on my app. I might do it by calling into the contact center or walking into the branch. And, technologies need to be able to deal with that multi-channel, that omni-channel, inbound, understand, well, I'm opening this, what's the service level I'm going to attach to that? So, that customer that's just said, I want to open a student account, actually has 15 accounts with us and he's one of our elite customers. Let's fast track his or her application. And I think that's where we're seeing banks use Blue Prism, not just on its own, but with front office chatbots, with digital, incorporating that into Salesforce, for example, which we're seeing a lot of demand around. And that's where partners get to embed, get to add a ton of value to our business. But, customers buying a front office solution from, an SI may not even know that Blue Prism's involved in that. But that's the new world, in terms of this kind of end-to-end approach. Telco, so telecoms is really ramping up, and that is being driven more by, it's being driven by things like 5G and IoT. It's also being driven by a need for them to, understand the impact on customer service, like we were talking about earlier. You're seeing the health sector through COVID, I think, really embrace this. So whether that's, service providers like the NHS or the health organizations at the front line, I think that's going to play into life sciences. So I think that's one of the untapped gold mines. Think about the race to get a COVID vaccine out, the opportunity to use automation and digital to streamline, drug development times, to deal with patient testing, deal with things like pharmacovigilance, adverse effect reporting. If you also think about the sectors that have been decimated by COVID, so retail, right? No one has been in the UK or pretty much globally, no one's been out shopping. Bezos has done well, obviously, so Amazon, accepted, but those retail stores are under severe pressure now. So they're going to need to innovate and innovate to survive. So I can see retail and their extended ecosystem of CPG. I can see that coming to the fore as well. Yeah.
On that note, I really want to thank you, Gavin, for spending so much of time with us and having a candid conversation. I really want to thank the whole Blue Prism team for really making India the automation capital of the world. Thank you, Gavin, for all your efforts in making India the ideal subcontinent for the automation industry. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me, Uday, and I will see you in Mumbai as soon as I can get on a plane again safely. Take care. Thanks,
Thank,
everybody. Goodbye.
thank you, Gavin. Thank you so much.
No, listen, that was that was fun.